Hello and welcome to episode 3 of Canada Coach Academy's new podcast called What? With a question mark. This podcast is meant to help coaches work through developing more skill around their craft. And I humbly bring you some topics that I think are important to coaching each week, whether that be me talking about a skill or strategy or a technique, or talking to guests about their journey through coaching, what they believe, some of the experiences they've had. Or I might even invite facilitators to really dig into some concepts around coaching that are super interesting and trending in today's market and profession of coaching. Today's podcast is all about goals. Goals is one of the, if not the most powerful part of a coaching conversation. And I'm actually hosting a workshop in November for our clients and students in the Canada Coach Academy community called Demystifying Goals. And really this is a workshop designed from a class that I took called Motivation at Harvard. And I thought it was so enlightening and so great and gave me such great information around how to support clients through setting goals and achieving goals and increasing their success in achieving goals. And so this topic today is something I'm very passionate about. And also I believe it's applicable to just anyone, not just a coach, but anybody who wants to learn how to become better at setting goals. And really what goals represent is change. And so anyone who is interested in progressing their lives towards something that they desire may get a lot out of our session today. The first thing you want to know is that goals begin with contracting. As coaches, especially in our academy, we are accredited by the International Coach Federation, which means that we uphold the core competencies of coaching that they've designed. The International Coach Federation is also known as ICF. And ICF has designed 8 core competencies in coaching, the first one being ethics. The second one is cultivating a coach mindset, because of course, professional ethics and mindset are such a big part of goal creation, but also of coaching and a successful coaching conversation. And contracting is the very first level of goals. And goals is the next competency that is identified by the ICF that is a major part of any coaching conversation. It sets the focus for the conversation, but more importantly, as I mentioned, it begins with contracting. Contracting is setting agreements that your client and you uphold throughout the relationship of, your coaching, designing and progression. And so when I speak of goals, I'd like to think of it as the overarching guide of a conversation and a contract with a client. Contracts come in all shapes and sizes, and of course, as a coach, you will learn to contract with your clients and be sure to include all of the most important details. For today's conversation, though, we're going to focus on goals in the conversation itself. How do we set goals? What is the complexity of goals? What do we need to be aware of as coaches when we're working with clients to design goals? I often mention as a facilitator in our programs the role that the coach plays in goal setting. There's a study by Lerner and Tetlock who, it's in 1999, it's an old study, but it's a Harvard study that talks about accountability and the role of accountability on an individual's thoughts, feelings, and actions. The reason I think this is important is because in coaching, one of the things that coaches do is witness the accountability of people to themselves to achieve goals. Might sound like a strange statement, but what I'm really saying is that the coaches observe people work through clarifying and unpacking goals for themselves. And we do that by observing, but we also do that by getting really curious about what we observe, asking good questions to help people narrow down and unpack their goals and clarify in a way that they have never done before, because most of us don't actually spend time clarifying our goals. We know that goals are important, and yet we don't sit down and work through what is it exactly that we want, specifically and measurably and timely. What is it about the goal? How can I get it to be so precisely clear in my mind that from that moment on, the moment that I clarify the goal, everything that I see and interact with in the world feeds the goal. It's what we call RAS, reticular activating system. What the coach is doing is helping a person become intentional about creating focus and awareness around feeding information to ourselves. We can't possibly notice every piece of information around us. Our brains would get overwhelmed and we wouldn't be able to probably do much at all. So RAS, or reticular activating system, is a way for our brains to protect itself from overload, information overload. And what goal setting does is helps us to become intentional around what we decide to focus on, because our brains are wired for negative thought. So if we don't spend time clarifying goals and moving towards what we want, the default mode is often avoidance. It's moving away from things. So coaches help people become more intentional with their actions, more intentional about what they focus on, and more intentional about what they want. And one way to do that is to focus on what, not how. So in goal setting, many coaches have a strong desire to be solution-oriented, and that is completely fine. There are a lot of people who have projects they need to execute on and things that they need to get done, whether that's professionally or personally. We have a lot of people come to coaching with plans that they want to execute. And those are what we call performance goals. Performance goals are typically task-oriented and have a lot to do with implementation, taking steps towards something. But in fact, the most powerful goals that we can work with our clients on are actually the what goals, the what's underneath the surface that is preventing us from taking action. These are more in line with deliberative goals. They're things that we think about. They're often called discovery goals. It's when we spend time observing ourselves and noticing what's coming up for us and what's getting in the way of progress. And so I often tell coaches that rather than coach the how, look for the what's in the way. And the example I often use is if somebody comes into a coaching session and they start to talk about what's on their mind, and you say, okay, what are some steps right now you can take to achieve that? And you might be in the first 5-10 minutes of the conversation. And that person will start to list steps. And so my next question instinctively is, well, if you know that these are the steps to take, why aren't you taking them? And when we think about that, what we realize is that there's often something underneath goals that we have that we're not moving towards and not able to progress, that is pulling us away, whether it's a competing commitment, an instinct to wait, to procrastinate, to avoid. Something's coming up, and that something is where we have the most power to help our clients. So when we're coaching and we have this, tendency to want to stay in solutions mode, we might be missing an opportunity to dig deeper. Because if you haven't gotten to the what's in the way, quote unquote, what will happen most likely is that your client will come back the next week and you'll say, how's it going? Tell me some of the highlights of your week. And they might say, well, I didn't execute on anything I said I was going to do. I didn't do the things I said I was going to do. And so they will come back with that, sort of heaviness around not having, followed through on something they committed to, but also still stuck in that same spot. And that stuck will stay there until we can figure out what's going on underneath. Unpacking that is an incredible experience with a client, but also that's where those aha moments come in. And that's where we see the biggest opportunity to help people move towards what they want. Goals come in all kinds of packages. There's all kinds of different types of goals. There's short-term goals, there's long-term goals, there's easy goals, there's hard goals to achieve. There's the performance versus learner, as I mentioned earlier. And then there's these avoidance and approach goals. Am I avoiding something or am I moving towards something? There's also single goals, and then there's multiple goals. And those multiple goals are most successfully achieved when we can break them down into small intentional steps. So another piece around goal setting that coaches do or are practiced at is to assess readiness for change. How ready is your client to change? And the way that we do that is to listen to how they engage and disengage with goals. We all do it. We all set goals, sometimes multiple goals, sometimes competing goals, and therefore we tend to, engage and disengage until it's either achieved or drops off our list. And this is a healthy process in our human development. And as coaches, we can listen for what will help somebody become more clear about a goal and their desire to achieve it. And typically what that's tied into is purpose. If there is a strong purpose around a goal, think of it as your North Star or your raison d'être, as they say in French. You have a strong mission that's pulling you towards something, the likelihood that you will disengage and then re-engage is much higher and stronger. So that re-engagement, you'll keep coming back to it because it's tied to a purpose. So one of the things coaching can do is help people figure out what is the purpose that you're tying your goal to. And sometimes what happens when we're listening for that readiness to change, what we're going to hear is resistance to change. And resistance sounds like but. It sounds like maybe. It often sounds like should, must, have to, need to. This is limiting language that reveals a limiting belief. And when we're listening for that language, we can help get curious about that language and help the client explore what that means to them. And more importantly, what they truly want, not what they think they wanted or they were told they wanted, but to really clarify their individual purpose around achieving something. And that goes into intrinsic motivation for action. So it's just a really interesting, complex conversation. But as coaches, what we do is hold space so people can work through those conversations and unpack them and reveal to themselves what's really in the way of their pursuit. We also talk a lot about values in coaching. Once we get to purpose and we get that to be clarified for a client, or we help to start clarify what is the purpose and the overall North Star, then we can start talking about, well, what values are you upholding as you pursue this goal? So when we tie goals into values, they become less ambiguous and we help people step into their integrity. Most people come to coaching with uncertainty and ambiguity. So as we help them unpack the clarity, we help them get more clear and more committed to and familiar with their values and how their goals are upholding their values. Because like it or not, we all have goals, whether we talk about them or not. Some of us, most of us, walk around with subconscious goals that we don't even realize are guiding us every day. For example, I, as a young person, might have had a very difficult interaction on a team sport. Let's say that I was in conflict, or I had my ego bruised, or I was hurt somehow, my feelings were hurt. And I created a meaning and an association with team sports that basically said, I'm not good at team sports and I don't like team sports. From that moment on, that becomes a guiding belief or a subconscious goal. Because from that moment on, I choose sports that are individual sports, skiing, tennis, golf. I choose sports that don't involve teams. And I'm not even really consciously aware of the reason why. But yet I go through life like this until one day, perhaps I meet a coach and I realize some of the subconscious beliefs that have been guiding my behavior. And so we all have these subconscious goals that are guiding us, and coaches help to get underneath the surface of those and to step into, a more conscious way of living and a more intentional way of setting goals. And we all have these subconscious goals that have been developed over time from a meaning we made of an event. And if the emotional memory of that event is strong, the meaning will be that much stronger. That will then guide our actions and behavior. This is a normal human process, and oftentimes it's because we are trying to protect ourselves. The person or that little girl in me that might have said team sports are not for me, I was protecting myself, protecting my ego, protecting my pride, protecting the little girl inside me. And so one of the strategies that we use as coaches to unpack what's really going on for someone around goals is to say, what part of you wants this and what part of you might be resisting this. So we talk about the readiness for change as a very important part of understanding, is this goal important today? Is it timely right now? Or is it something that is part of a bigger picture? One of the ways that we can dig into this a little bit more is through some research that Keegan and Lahi, I believe it's Lahi anyway, did on immunity to change. They're both out of Harvard, and they wrote a book that's about 3 inches thick, and it's all about the beliefs that guide our behavior, those subconscious beliefs that we don't even realize are there. And they have a process for this exploration that really helps unlock why people do what they do and what we're really committed to. And then by going into the cost and the risk of that commitment. So what am I giving up when I stay in that safety zone, or when I start to reveal the beliefs that are actually guiding behavior that is against what I really want because it protects me and I stay safe? So there's a whole process around this, which I'm not going to try and get into now. But there's so much great work done around helping people get clear about goals and helping people work through the change and progress in incremental steps, small wins. That's how we protect our clients' confidence. When we offer them small wins over time and we see progress over time, that's how we can really support people to change towards, and in a positive way, towards what they want. The other part of change that is really, I think, an important part of the conversation is the systems that we know about behavior change, the science around behavior change that really can help explain even further what makes a successful outcome versus a non-successful outcome. Why are some people successful at achieving goals while others are not? And that one of those systems, there's many behavior models, but one of the ones that I like to refer to is the Beckhart-Harris change model. And this model says that there are 3 main pillars to change. The first pillar is the dissatisfaction, or D, dissatisfaction with the current state. In order for us to change, we have to have something that we are uncomfortable with right now, that we want to change, that we want to see improve. So if we don't have that discomfort, the likelihood of having some internal or intrinsic motivation for change is probably not very high. So the first thing we want to understand is, what are we currently dissatisfied with? The second pillar is the vision for what you want, or V. So the vision is about, what do we want to create? What do we want to design? What do we want to move towards? We have to have some kind of idea around what it is we want. And then the third one is the will, or W. The will to do the work, the sometimes very hard work of change. The will to do the work of change is often about stepping into the discomfort zone, stepping into that uncomfortable place of new and different that we call change. And so that could be sometimes the hardest part and the biggest opportunity to help people with change. And all of that, the dissatisfaction, the vision, and the will, have to be stronger than the resistance to change. So the resistance is the but, it's the should, it's the need to, it's the have to. So we want to explore resistance as it comes up. And it doesn't mean that because resistance is there that change can't happen. It's just about exploring the obstacles. When we know the obstacles, we can prevent and repair and prepare for them. If we avoid that resistance, we pretend it's not there, that's when it gets us. That's when we stop progressing, or at least potentially stop progressing. And so this is all a very beautiful space. It's all about stepping into a reflective state of mind as opposed to a reflexive state of mind. Coaches take people out of reflex and into reflection. We all have this natural tendency to act and react quickly. And so when we can step into a coaching conversation, what we do is create pause to examine, what is it that's, first of all, we want, and what is it that's in the way of what we want, and start to break down and explore for ourselves our inner beings around, what it is that we strive to do and to achieve. So maybe you can tell I'm a little bit passionate about this. I think that coaching conversations are an opportunity to challenge what we believe are acceptable and familiar concepts and ideas, and move into a disruptive conversation that allows for change to happen. When we disrupt our perspectives and our ideas, we have a chance to change what the next steps we take, right? Our actions. When we disrupt our beliefs, we create new beliefs, which create new actions. And with new actions, there's always new possibilities for the future. And so as a coach, what I really hope that you get from this conversation is that there is a beautiful exploration to be done around what clients want, what they want to pursue, and how you can partner with them, partner in a partnership of equals by observing, witnessing, challenging, questioning, revealing, and evoking awareness for your client to help them become better and move towards what it is that they want. So I really appreciate this space to be able to talk through these ideas, unedited and really, kind of ad lib in the way that my ideas are flowing, and I hope that makes sense. And next week, I'm super excited to invite a coach from our community. His name is Dominic Brennan, and he is coming to us to talk about his path to coaching and his work as a mental health professional and how coaching has complemented that work. As well, he's going to talk about his journey in one of our certification programs and the highlights of that journey for him. So thank you for spending this time with me today. I really appreciate it, and I hope that you'll leave questions or comments. If anything comes up for you, I'm happy to address any comments and questions in future episodes. For now, take care, and thanks for listening.